And unmute. Hey everyone. Hi. Welcome to the Democracy Cycles 2026 webinar. Thank you for taking the time today to join us to learn more about the Democracy Cycle Commissioning and Development Program. I'm Boo Frabel, the director of the Democracy Cycle, and today I'll go through the information available in the submission guidelines, which you may view on our website, and we will put a link to in the chat as well. If you want to follow along, all the information I'm sharing is in that submissions guide or guidelines. This webinar session will be recorded, is being recorded, and will be posted to the Democracy Cycles landing page on the PAC NYC website if you want to revisit it later. So, we have about 75 minutes together today. We will spend most of our time introducing the program, talking through eligibility requirements, and the application and review process. We'll also discuss the timeline and share resources for application support, along with a little information about PAC NYC and Civis Foundation. We'll save the last part of our time together in Q&A to address your questions. Speaking of that, please type your questions into the chat as they come to you. We'll stack them up and address them at the end of the session. Again, I'm Boo Frabel, director of the Democracy Cycle. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joining you from New York City at the Perlman Performing Arts Center at the World Trade Center, or PAC NYC for short. I have the wonderful Naomi Vernon with me today, who is an IT support specialist at PAC NYC, and her pronouns are she, her. Naomi will now take us through the format of today's webinar, as well as info on accessibility.
Hello, everyone. I am Naomi, and I'm going to take you through just a little bit of housekeeping. To ask questions, click the Q&A button in your menu bar and type in your questions. Please do type your questions as they come to you. We will stack those questions up and address them at the end of the session. For captions, you can click the live transcript option to have closed captioning. Please note that this is done by a computer, so it may not be 100% accurate.
Next slide.
You probably have noticed this already, but the participants will not be able to turn on your camera during the webinar. I have a note on accessibility as well. The online platform for applications is Submittable, which follows the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the WCAG 2.2, affirming that the platform is accessible to a wide range of submitters with disabilities and follows industry standards. If you have any additional questions, any access needs, you may contact Paul Bearhorst. He's our accessibility manager at PAC NYC. His email is paul.bearhorst@pacnyc.org. His phone number is 303-249-1425. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Naomi. Thanks a lot. We are almost done with the introduction now, and for further resources, again, please see the Democracy Cycle landing page on the PAC NYC website, the Democracy Cycle submission guidelines, and the Democracy Cycle FAQs or frequently asked questions. Finally, we want to let you know how you can reach us throughout this process. If you have questions about your eligibility or general questions about the program that are not answered in the resources listed, I encourage you to sign up for a one-on-one consultation with me using the Calendly link in the website or on the website, which we will also put in the chat. You can also email democracy.cycle@pacnyc.org with any questions not answered in this webinar, on the website, in the submission guidelines, or in the FAQs. Because our capacity is limited, plan to allow at least 7 business days for an answer to an emailed question. Now, some basic info about the Democracy Cycle. The Democracy Cycle is a commissioning and development program. a collaboration between PAC NYC and Civis Foundation, in which over 5 years, we will commission and develop 25 new performing arts works across the fields of theater, dance, music, opera, and multidisciplinary performance that express themes related to the nature, practice, and experience of democracy, particularly as it is practiced in the United States. The application portal is open now and submittable. Again, that's our submission and review platform at submittable.com. And the deadline to submit your proposal is April 28th before 5 p.m. Eastern Time. All 2026 open call applicants will be notified of their project's status by January 2027 at the latest. Please pay attention to whether or not you receive a confirmation email when you submit. Your notification email from Submittable, as well as any questions we may have during the review process, will go to that same email address, so make sure it's not being sent to your junk folder. Commissioned artists will receive $60,000 in support, which consists of a $30,000 commission to create a new work of live performance, plus a further $30,000 to support the development of that work. In 2024, we awarded 8 commissions. We awarded a further 9 commissions in the 2025 open call, and will award another 8 commissions in the 2026 open call. You may see the 2024 and 2025 awarded artists and projects at the links at the top of the Democracy Cycle's homepage. Highlighting the helpful links once again for the Democracy Cycle's homepage, submission guidelines, and FAQs. The homepage, www.pacnyc.org/the-democracy-cycle. The Democracy Cycle submission guidelines, www.pacnyc.org/the-democracy-cycle-submission-guidelines. And the FAQs or frequently asked questions, www.pacnyc.org/the-democracy-cycle-FAQs. Now for a little info about us. The Democracy Cycle is a joint project of the Perlman Performing Arts Center and Civis Foundation and is made possible by generous support from Civis. Perlman Performing Arts Center, PAC NYC, at the World Trade Center is a new home for emerging and established artists in theater, dance, music, opera, film, and media from New York City and around the world. The Perlman's mission is to create connections by cultivating bonds between extraordinary artists and communities, with exemplary performances in active dialogue across the arts and in our flexible, intimate spaces, inviting conversation and new relationships. Our art and our audiences reflect the dynamic energy of all 5 boroughs of New York City. We invite everyone to join us as we celebrate creative expression from around the world. Our work asks all of us to consider and embrace the complexities of society. The center is where the world trades ideas. Civis Foundation advances the common good through investments in root cause advocacy, cultural work, and facilities that illuminate our interdependent future. Civis pursues their work both independently and in collaboration with others whose missions align. Civis believes that coalitions and partnerships can create winning campaigns for meaningful societal change. By leveraging the unique strengths of private sector companies, government programs, and nonprofit organizations, Civis is nurturing an American democracy with the constant capacity to effectively serve the welfare of all people residing in this country. So, the purpose of the Democracy Cycle program. Our hope is that the commissioned projects will enrich and expand discussion of and participation in democracy, as it is practiced within the United States and worldwide, be it in the national, state, regional, or hyperlocal community realms. To be clear, we're speaking of democracy with a lowercase d, meaning a system of government, not a political party. You can see the definition of democracy with which we're working in our FAQs, on our FAQs page. The Democracy Cycle program, which has been in development for a number of years, is inspired by the following 5 beliefs generated in 2023 by the Democracy Cycle Working Group. 1. Democratic values are a global expression of humanity's striving to live with one another with respect and in peace. 2. Democracy, as practiced in the United States, includes a history of founding exclusions. It has been and must continue to be the ongoing work of our society to expand upon the ideals of inclusivity embedded in our founding documents. 3, democracy faces significant perceived and actual threats in the current moment, both domestically and internationally. 4, the intersection of capitalism and democracy creates both opportunities and tensions. 5, artists are the beating heart of democratic values because of their ability to imagine new worlds, envision new possibilities, and provoke meaningful discourse across any number of divides. Please do note that the primary focus of the democracy cycle is on democracy as it is currently being practiced in the United States. However, commissioned projects may include references to current and former democracies worldwide, provided the projects have potential for informing and deepening our understanding of American democracy. Moving on to eligibility requirements. Eligible artists are generative artists currently creating new original live performance work in the theater, dance, music, opera, or multidisciplinary fields. We do not fund remounts or adaptations of existing works, and we have added a definition of generative artist to our FAQs on the website, which is, quote, generative artists are those who conceive and create new original work. For example, choreographers, composers, playwrights, and devisers, writers, etc., close quote. Artists who are not considered generative artists for the purpose of this commissioning program include directors, designers, dramaturgs, and producers. Artists eligible for the Democracy Cycle commissioning program have created, completed, and premiered at least 2 evening-length prior works of live performance publicly, though not in a degree-granting program. Another definition now in the FAQs is premiere, and it reads, quote, we consider the premiere of a project as the first public presentation of a finished performance work when it is open to review. Workshop showings, work in progress showings, and staged readings are not premieres, close quote. Artists who have not yet created and premiered at least 2 evening-length pieces of live performance outside of a university setting are not eligible for this opportunity. Artists may be based anywhere in the world and be from anywhere in the world. This is a national and international open call. Okay, continuing with eligibility. Applicants are required to complete the eligibility screen in Submittable before they may begin their application. If you have questions about eligibility, one-on-one eligibility consultations may be scheduled with me via Calendly, and that link is both on the Democracy Cycle landing page and in the submission guidelines. I will be releasing Calendly consultation appointment slots by month. Right now, you can schedule through March. When it gets closer to the mid or end of March, I'll open up appointments for April. So keep checking back for more available appointments. Please note that we will be looking at your resume during these eligibility consultations, so please have that ready to share. Please also note that I cannot give you feedback on your project narrative or watch your work samples during these consultations, but I can answer what questions you may have on whether you or your project are eligible. Artists may only submit one application as lead artist, but you may also be named as a collaborator on other applications. Applications must be submitted by the artist, not by an organization, producer, or agent, etc. Democracy Cycle commissions are awarded to artists, not organizations. Finally, please note that whoever submits the application will be the email address that receives all notifications from Submittable, including confirmation of submission, questions about your application, and notifications about the status of your application. Ineligible artists include students enrolled full-time in a degree-granting program, artists under the age of 18, and artists, including any of the main collaborators who are employees of PAC NYC or Civis, immediate family of employees of PAC NYC or Civis, or consultants to PAC NYC or Civis. Projects are ineligible if the main purpose of the project is the curation or documentation of existing work, or if the proposed project has already premiered or is planned to premiere before May 1, 2027, or if the proposed work advocates by name for the success or failure of a current partisan candidate for office or a named political party. And projects are ineligible if the proposed work is not meant to be performed live by live performers in front of a live audience. All right, on to the timeline. On February 9th, 2026, the application portal opened on Submittable for the 2026 open call this past Monday. On February 12th, 2026, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we are holding the info session webinar. We are here now, which will be recorded and posted on the Democracy Cycle homepage. April 28th, 2026 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time is the application deadline for the 2026 open call. Then from May through September 2026, submitted applications will be screened for eligibility by Democracy Cycle staff and then reviewed by a minimum of 2 readers. At that point, using readers' evaluative scores, a list of finalists will be developed. Continuing with the timeline, in fall 2026, a peer panel drawn from the fields of performing arts and the study and practice of democracy will review and discuss the finalists' proposals and select 8 projects to receive Democracy Cycle 2026 commissions. In the winter of 2027, all applicants will be notified of their project's status. And from 2027 through 2028, all 25 commissioned projects continue to develop, workshop, and premiere. Okay, selection criteria. All readers and panelists will consider the following in selecting the commissioned projects. How does the proposed work expand, celebrate, or critique democracy, the practice and experience of democracy, and/or democratic ideals? How has the artist or artists identified and responded to ideas or themes related to democracy, including core democratic principles and values? For example, core democratic principles and values include but are not limited to political equality, majority rule, minority rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition the government for a redress of grievances, and freedom of religion, among others. This is key. You'll need to be very clear about your project's specific relationship to a specific aspect or aspects of democracy in order to be competitive. Readers and panelists will also consider: does the work demonstrate clear potential for generating meaningful reflection and discourse on democracy as demonstrated by the project narrative, samples of prior work, and the artistic history of yourself and your collaborators? You will submit your application through Submittable, the Submittable portal at www.submittable.com. And to do so, you need to have or create a free Submittable account. You may find the link to Submittable at the bottom of the Democracy Cycle's landing page. But that link at the bottom of our homepage will lead you directly to the Democracy Cycle 2025 application, but there will be an opportunity for you to make a free account if you have not already done that. The application for the Democracy Cycle requests the following information: name and contact info of the lead artist. Each Democracy Cycle commission will be awarded directly to an individual generative artist. In cases where the work is being made by an established collective, please select one artist to represent the application on the collective's behalf. Again, please note that this lead artist you identify will receive all submittable communications at their email address unless someone has used another submittable account to submit the application, in which case, whosever submittable account it is will receive all of those notifications and communications. The application asks for the lead artist's primary artistic discipline, reason being Although you may work in multiple disciplines, selecting one discipline here helps us organize and assign applications to knowledgeable readers and panelists. So please do select the discipline in which you would be most comfortable being reviewed. Then the name of the company or organization you create work with, if applicable. This would be if you are a member of a collective or devised theater group who's been creating together for a while. If this is not applicable, you may write NA for not applicable. Qualifying productions. The application requests information on your 2 qualifying productions. A reminder that you, the lead artist, must have created and premiered at least 2 evening-length works of live performance to be eligible for this opportunity. We ask you to list out the title, premiere date, venue, and running time of these qualifying productions, as well as your generative role. For example, playwright or choreographer or composer or member of a devised theater collective that creates collectively, etc. The application also asks you to provide a link to further information on these 2 qualifying productions. Please note that this does not automatically mean paste in 2 links to videos. Rather, we're looking for links to press or web pages that have information about the premiere of your qualifying productions. Those links may be video links, but they do not have to be. And a reminder that staged readings and/or workshop or work in progress showings do not count as premieres. If you have questions about whether your 2 qualifying productions actually are qualifying productions, please sign up for a consultation with me via the Calendly link on the homepage. The application goes on to ask you for the proposed project's title. This, of course, may be a working title. Then a 1-sentence project summary. Think of this as your 1-sentence elevator pitch or the blurb that would appear in show listings. And 1 sentence on how your proposed project will address democracy. Please be very specific about which specific aspect of democracy your project will address. This prompt is key in helping the selection committee understand the proposal and the work's alignment with the goals of this commission. Specificity is key. The application also requests the following information: a narrative description or project narrative of your proposed project. We ask that the lead artist share the core ideas and intended creative process of the proposed work in a 3,500 character narrative or a 4-minute video or audio submission if needed for accessibility purposes. You may repeat what you wrote in the above 1 sentence about your project's relationship to democracy in the project narrative. Don't worry about redundancy or repetitiveness. It's useful to remember that the straightforward descriptions are the most helpful to orient the readers and panelists in this section. As artists and professionals themselves, the readers and panelists understand that the work is nuanced and may be challenging to capture in any narrative description. They will absorb its dimensions through the whole of the proposal, but the narrative description is a place to ground them with as concrete a description as you are able to provide at this point in the project's development. Please include the following in your project narrative in whatever sequence you prefer. What is the core form of the work? Is it a scripted play, a devised theater piece, a musical, a dance work, dance theater piece, a song cycle, chamber opera, multidisciplinary movement work, or something else? What do you anticipate the audience will see on stage and experience in the room during the performance? Then, how do you intend the work to stimulate dialogue or analysis around the idea of democracy or democracy's current state of practice, particularly as it is practiced in the United States? Noting that this prompt is also key in helping the selection committee understand the work's alignment with the goals of this commission. What is your approach to creating this work? Please briefly describe your creative process. How does your work typically take shape? If you have already begun making the proposed work, what has your approach looked like to date? Please know that we understand your processes may differ from work to work, or that it may change within a single work. any insight on how your works tend to develop are welcome. Then, do you have other existing support, such as a producer or additional commissioners? Please note that this is for informational purposes. The commission is open to works at any stage of development. The next question is, who do you see as your greatest artistic influences or your artistic lineage? Please share here what artists you feel have helped you form your own artistic style or whose footsteps you feel you walk in and why. And then there is an open-ended question that asks, is there anything else you would like us to know about your work? This question is open space to briefly offer relevant information that may not be covered elsewhere in the application, but that you want the reviewers to know. It's an optional question. If you have nothing further to share, simply write NA. Please upload an artistic resume or CV detailing artistic and/or professional experiences for yourself and for up to 2 artistic collaborators besides the lead artist yourself. While we recognize that producers often play a strongly creative role, we ask that collaborators named here be generative artists. Feel free to include your producer in the "Is there anything else to share" field. Please also provide a short narrative bio for yourself and for up to 2 other collaborators. If you are working as a collective, please provide an additional short bio for the collective itself. Next, you'll be asked to input a projected project budget for the creation and development process on the form provided in the application. We do understand you may be in the early stage of the work and that both income and expenses are prospective and estimated at this time. There are sample budget line items in the submission guidelines. Feel free to either use those or some of those, or use your own expense category line items. Please include expense and income items that add up to balance against each other or show a very small surplus. For example, if you have income that includes the $60,000 Democracy Cycle Commission and Development Support, maybe another projected $10,000 grant, and some amount in anticipated individual contributions that altogether total $83,000 in income, in order to be a balanced budget, your expenses should also come to a total of $83,000. And because you should show both the Democracy Cycle's $30,000 commission and the $30,000 in development support in your budget as projected or pending income, they have already been auto-filled in your budget. Please add in any other pending or confirmed income below those pre-filled lines. One important note, in the budget form and submittable, put only numbers in the right-hand column. No dollar signs, no commas, no words, only numbers, or it won't auto-compute. All line item names should go in the left-hand column, such as your expense type or your income type. For income, mark all your sources of income either projected or pending or confirmed in the left-hand column after the type of income. For example, quote, individual contributions, parentheses, projected, close parentheses, close quote. And make any notes about your line items in the middle column. You don't have to have any notes, but if you do, put them in the middle column. All right, so a timeline for the development of the work. Please identify major milestones and associated dates surrounding the project's conception, development, funding, and presentation, starting from the initial stages of the creation of the work through to the imagined completion of the development period. Please indicate where you are in this timeline at the time of submission. We understand that milestones are subjective and that there are likely many of them inside your process. Please include no fewer than 7 and no more than 15 milestones from beginning to completion of the development of the project. We have sample milestones in the submission guidelines just to give you an idea of what those might be. Completion of the development stage can mean different things in different disciplines. For theater, it can mean arriving at what you consider to be a final draft of the script, or it can mean completing a tech residency with a public showing and video documentation. For music or opera, it can mean completing the score and the libretto. It can also mean completing a tech residency with a public showing. For all disciplines, for the purposes of this commission, we consider completion to be at the point at which you arrive to be the point at which you arrive before you enter into a production period for the premiere. On to work samples. Please submit 2 recent, or as recent as possible given the pandemic, work samples in the form of videos, audio, images, and/or links to videos. See submittable for format specs. These must be production examples of live performance work that you have created and premiered. Video work samples of production footage are the most helpful to reviewers. Please do not submit edited trailers, as that is not an acceptable work sample. Please know that work samples must either be in English or include a translation, for example, English subtitles on a video. Feel free to reach out for guidance to democracy.cycle@pacnyc.org if you have questions. URL links for videos are welcome. And because video work samples should be no longer than 5 continuous minutes, please include cue points when pointing the panel to an online work sample within a longer video. And make sure, please, to include all necessary logins and passwords. Test them twice or 3 times before you hit submit. Send the link to a friend and ask them to test the login and password. Please include a short description of all work samples, including the title and the year completed. If there is a clear connection in theme or form between the sample of a prior work and the proposed project, it can be helpful to briefly point that out for reviewers. This connection is not required, but if it's there, please point it out in the short description of the work sample. This year, there is an added 3rd work sample, which is optional. This is for you to submit a work in progress from the proposed project, if such exists. For example, you may submit up to 5 minutes of video documentation of a work in progress showing of your live performance project, or 10 to 15 pages of a draft script of your proposed project. This is not required, but it is an option. Work samples can vary by discipline. In theater and dance and multidisciplinary, your work samples should be 2 video work samples of production footage of previously premiered work, each cued to a continuous 5-minute duration. And, if such exists, a 3rd work sample of either video of a workshop showing or 10 to 15 pages of a draft script for the proposed project. Then in music and opera and multidisciplinary work, your work samples could be 2 audio or video work samples of production footage of a previously premiered production, each cued to a 5-minute duration. And if such exists, a 3rd work sample of either video of a workshop or 10 to 15 pages of a draft libretto for the proposed project. Then contact info for one professional reference. Please share here the name of a colleague you feel might best speak to your work and creative practice. This might be a collaborator or producer or presenter with whom you've worked in the past. Please do not include your current collaborators on this project or those who may have a direct financial stake in a positive outcome for this commission. Please don't make yourself your own reference. I've heard from some people that Submittable sometimes auto-fills this with your own information. Please just double check this before you submit. So now we're done with the application proper and have arrived at the optional questions in the request for demographic info section. Excuse me. This section is fully optional. The information collected from this section allows PAC NYC to evaluate the effectiveness of our outreach. Specifically, this data will allow us the opportunity to strengthen future requests for proposals and open call processes, but only complete what questions you feel comfortable answering. You will not be dinged for not completing anything in this section. We're almost done now. For further resources, please see the Democracy Cycle landing page on the PAC NYC website, the Democracy Cycle submission guidelines, and the Democracy Cycle FAQs or frequently asked questions at pacnyc.org/the-democracy-cycle-FAQs. And finally, we want to let you know how you can reach us throughout this process. If you have questions about your eligibility or general questions about the program, I encourage you to sign up for a one-on-one consultation with me using the Calendly link on the website. You may also email democracy.cycle@pacnyc.org with any questions not answered in this webinar, on the website, in the submission guidelines, or in the FAQs. Because our capacity is limited, please do check there first. And if you email your question, please plan to allow at least 7 business days for an answer to an emailed question. And a final reminder, applications for the Democracy Cycle are due Tuesday, April 28th, 2026, before 5 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to emphasize that the deadline is not midnight, it is 5 p.m. Eastern Time. This is so I may be available to support any issues around submission on that day during working hours and before the deadline. Please note that late applications will not be accepted and incomplete applications will not be considered. To avoid encountering any technical difficulties that prevent you from completing and submitting your application in time, we strongly recommend that you have all of your material uploaded and your application finished and submitted by or before April 20th. Avoid the rush hour and submit in advance of the deadline. Okay, so it looks like we have some questions asked in the Q&A, and if you're thinking of one but haven't yet asked, please do type your questions in there so we may address them or look through to see if someone's already asked your question and put a +1 on it by liking it and kind of upvote it. So let's look. How are we doing on all that? Okay. Let's see. 1 second. All right. Let's see. Someone asked, I noticed that notification is pushed to January 2027. Is that in anticipation of having to review more submissions? Last year notification was in October. Well, I had planned to make last year's notifications in October. Best laid plans. We had 744 submissions last year, and it took longer to review them than I had planned, and I pushed notification later so that we could give each application the attention that it deserved to honor everyone's labor in putting together your proposals. So there a bit of a rolling notification last year. And I know that gave a lot of people a lot of anxiety. So I'm managing expectations this year. If I can notify earlier, I will, but that's why I'm saying January 2027. So you can plan accordingly. Next question that's been upvoted. How would you classify a comedian in the mold of John Oliver practicing in theater, multidisciplinary? Well, if their show is scripted, that would be a really interesting proposal. They would have to very clearly, as with every artist and every proposal, very, very clearly delineate what aspect of democracy they are addressing, aspect or aspects. That would be fantastic. I look forward to seeing those proposals. Just one question before I continue. Alessandra is looking at all the questions. Alessandra, did you put these in here in order of their upvotes? I'm going to say that you have. So I'm going to answer them in the order that you've put them in here. Regarding the specification that the work should be original, what about new works inspired by existing texts? Okay, that's a great question that has been asked in the past. Uh, the democracy cycle does not accept straightforward adaptations. It really depends on how much you put of your own work into the project. If you use a novel or a story or what have you, existing material as a starting point, as underlying material, and in the process of writing the play or the multidisciplinary project, you change it to the point where you make that existing work your own, then it may not be an adaptation, but rather inspired by. That said, if it is a straightforward adaptation of a novel to a stage play and you just adapt the already written words and situations to be on stage, then yes, that is an adaptation and perhaps not right for the democracy cycle. Going back, another question is going back to eligibility regarding premiere. I've had several works presented publicly for one night at a time by different presenters, but never a full run. And they ask, does that count as eligible? If those one night presentations are, if you consider them finished, and if they were open for review, they can be premieres. They can be eligible productions. The next question is, will theater for young audiences be considered? Yes, yes, it will. Then another question says, I am curious about whether it's appropriate to include context in the proposal, specifically why now is an important moment for this work to be produced, either because of social and political context or because of personal/artistic context. Context is always important. Now, in terms of what kind of context you're thinking of including, this is a good time for me to point out in the FAQs the question that says, excuse me, in our FAQs on our website, we've put a question that came up a lot, which is, are you looking specifically for projects that reflect a particular political ideology or point of view? Our answer is no. We believe that the idea of democracy is not party specific. The democracy cycle is a cross-ideological project. Proposals that advocate by name for a specific party or candidate, proposals that advocate by name for the success or failure of a specific party or current candidate are not eligible. We welcome proposals from artists of all persuasions on topics that reflect all points of view. We are looking for projects that derive from a fundamental belief in democracy and the imperative of protecting it. Now, that said, I think it's important for all of us to remember that talking about issues is not inherently partisan. It is actually our duty as citizens to think about how our democracy works, think about the different parts of our democracy, go in and see what's working, see what's not. And the context of this particular moment is very important. Just see in the FAQs our definition of partisan and act accordingly. Moving forward, another question. Someone writes, double checking. Directors are not considered generative artists even in a devised work. These are a few different questions, so I'm going to answer them one by one. First question. So directors are not considered generative artists even in a devised work. That is case by case. If the director in that situation is also an inherently generative artist in the making of the work, then I think it's important that you extend your title for purposes of this application as co-creator. If you just say director, you will not be considered a generative artist. Then the next part of the question is directors who also are conceivers. These are not written in the form of questions. Are directors who also are conceivers considered generative artists? I refer you to my last answer. Um, Please clearly identify when you are a co-conceiver in the application. Don't assume that the reviewers will know your work's history. They might, but don't assume. And then the last part of the question is, so the work should be submitted by a writer. Writers are definitely generative artists. And when you are working in a collective, it's important to really identify yourself as such. If you are a director who shapes material that was written by others, I know that this is a question and it is debated, but for the purposes of this application, you are not considered a generative artist. Okay, next question. I submitted a proposal last year. Can I submit the same project this year? Yes, you can. Just look through the timeline and make sure that your anticipated point of completion does not land before May 1, 2027. Or rather, your anticipated date of where you'll be ready for a premiere does not land before May 1, 2027. The next question is it possible to get feedback on the previous submission? I offered feedback to finalists and semifinalists last year. That was the limit of folks that I could offer feedback to. Again, we had 744 applications. So if you were not a semifinalist or a finalist, I'm unfortunately not able to give you feedback. Just don't have the capacity. If you sign up for a one-on-one consultation, I can answer questions you might have about this year's application. Then the next part of that question is, does the judging panel change with each cycle? The panel was different from 2024 to 2025. There may be one repeat on the 2026 panel, but probably not. And the readers will be predominantly new readers. Great, moving on. Can created and premiered include producing new work? I think you're asking if you as a producer can count as a generative artist. No. For the purposes of this opportunity, you are not, a producer is not considered a generative artist. I know, as a producer myself, I chafe at that, but for the purposes of this opportunity, producers are not included, thought of as generative artists, considered generative artists. Moving on, does a 2-hour one-person show where the writer is also the actor count as a previous produced play? It sounds like a one-person show. Yeah. If you got to the point where you considered it finished, it was open for review, and you performed it, that counts as a premiere. And when the writer is also the performer, you are the generative artist. Moving on, are artist assemblies eligible to apply? For example, a chamber music ensemble. That's going to be case by case. Actually, I think you're asking if you can apply the lead artist being the name of the ensemble. No, it needs to be a person. We grant or we award commissions to people. You can pick somebody in your ensemble who is a composer, who has composed at least 2 evening length works that have premiered publicly. But you cannot have the lead artist be a chamber music ensemble. Moving on, I think this is a little bit of a repeat. But will you consider a project that is designed for family and young audiences? Yes, we will. Another question is, under anything else to share, can we put links to additional resources we want to share that relate to the project? No. The reason for that is reviewers will have a limited amount of time they can spend on each application, and they will be reviewing a somewhat large number of applications. So please don't put links in the anything else to share field. If you want to write out what in the links you wanted to share, sentences, paragraphs of what you think is important, that's great, but not links. Then moving on, are there a certain number of spots reserved for New York artists? No, there are not. Another question, when you say previous work has had to be premiered outside of a university setting, do you mean students, or does this include work that I generated and premiered as an artist fellow faculty? I do mean students. In terms of an artist fellow / faculty, that's a little different. If you have only premiered works inside a university setting, that's not ideal, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily render you ineligible. That was really meant to be students, to be relevant to students. Let's see. Someone asked, do we assume that the project premieres at PAC as part of our timeline? You could assume that. It would not necessarily be accurate. In the FAQs, you'll see that there is a question, will our projects premiere, will all commissioned projects premiere at PAC? PAC NYC will have the option to premiere commissioned projects, but no obligation to premiere a commissioned project. Once a project is commissioned, together we'll define deliverables. And in the process of the commissioned artist developing the work and sending PAC those deliverables, we'll have discussions about that. But it is not an automatic premiere at PAC. Let's see. Someone asked, if I have been commissioned for a production later this year, can it be counted as a qualifying production? Well, that actually depends on what you mean by later. If your project premieres before May 1 of this year, and you submit, no, April, May. If your project premieres before April 28th and you submit your application after it premieres, it can be counted as a qualifying production. I hope that's clear. Do performances done in non-traditional spaces count as eligible full-length work? Public spaces. I mean, I think you're talking about site-specific or site-responsive performance, and yes, they can count as eligible full-length work. If you have any questions about a specific instance, please book a consultation with me through Calendly. Then can the work sample be an audio story available on Audible and therefore requiring a subscription? No, because that is not a live performance. If you have video of that work as a stage performance, that is a work sample that you could include, but not an audio story. That's not meant to be performed live. It may have been performed live, in which case send the video of that live performance. Let's see. When you are reviewing work samples from a creative team, is it important to you to see work from mainly the principal artist? I think you mean the lead artist. Or would you like work samples from everyone on the application? We are working with the lead artist work samples. So choose your lead artist accordingly. As a playwright, I have no video to offer as a work sample, but I do have scripts. Will these do? I'm gonna say that you can use video from Equity Productions. Um, uh, uh, and there's a way to get that video and use it for purposes of a grant or a commission application. I'm not going to go into how you do that because I will inevitably misstate it, but you can do that, and you could talk to your producer about that. You can always watermark the video. You can always cut it up to just that 5 minutes. But you could use scripts. I will say that that will not serve you as well as video will. Um, Unfortunately, that's just real. Moving on. Would PAC NYC provide writing workshop space in their facilities? If so, would that workspace be provided in kind or would that be expense? PAC NYC has a dearth of space. We're in New York, so that's just inherently working with limited space. And we're on the World Trade Center site. So that's also working with a very small footprint. That is why we provide development support funds so that you can rent space elsewhere with that funds. We're not able to provide development space at PAC. Wish we could, we can't. Do you accept Zoom premieres as premieres in the work sample? It's not ideal. We're really this is about live performance. I understand that we had a pandemic and live performances were not possible, but we've been out of it for a bit now. I know that's debatable, but we've been having live performances for a bit now. If you have a choice between using production footage of a live performance or a recording of a Zoom premiere, go with the live performance production footage. Will you read the reviews for the works we submit as proof of eligibility? That's a great question. The Democracy Cycle staff will, as we check your eligibility. Do not assume that the reviewers will. Some of them may, but they are not required to. The generative or the eligible productions section is really meant to prove your eligibility, and the Democracy Cycle staff goes through all of those before we assign proposals to reader reviewers. Let's see. Moving down, qualifying production 1 and 2. Okay, this person is asking whether the 2 qualifying productions must be the same as the 2 work samples. No, they do not have to be the same. They can be, but they do not have to be. They're not required to be at all. If they are the same, do make sure to put them in both places. Don't just say refer to qualifying production, but you have to put them in both places and answer all the questions. Moving on, up to how many pages would be recommended for a resume, CV, curriculum vitae? We are looking for up to 2 pages. Again, that goes to capacity of the reviewers. And I understand that many of you have been creating for quite a while and have more credits than can fit on 2 pages. Please just edit as such. Let's see. let's see. Another person says, so the democracy cycle emphasizes the project within the context of American democracy. This person is based in Germany, in Europe, and asks whether it makes sense to apply. Yes, this is a national and international open call. And the question is, does it make sense for artists who are not based uh, in uh, uh, in the US to apply? Yes, and it's important that people from outside of the US clearly delineate how their project is going to help uh, 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 I'm forgetting my exact wording that I wrote myself. Uh, uh, Shed light on American democracy. So if a proposal, which might be absolutely fabulous, if it makes no reference to the US specifically, I know we all learned that America is a continent this past week. But if it makes no reference to democracy as it is practiced in the US, we can't necessarily make those linkages for you. It is on you to make those linkages for us. And if you have other questions on that, please do book a meeting with me via Calendly. Let's see. I'm gonna say, folks, if you could write your questions as questions, that would be helpful. Somebody's question is, if the work has been shown before in a limited capacity and a new rendition would be much grander in production and scale, is it okay to submit it as a proper premiere? That would not probably fly. It sounds like it's already premiered and you're looking to enhance its physical production. That sounds like the same piece, but you're just making it bigger. Let's see. If the proposed project currently exists as a full draft of a play script, is it eligible? If it has not premiered, yes. It is ideal if the project is has some development ready or has some development left to do. The next part of that question I think might answer what I just said. If yes, do you recommend defining project completion as completion of a development workshop of the play, not open to reviewers, and completion of the script so it is ready for production? It actually sounds like you've got some development work left to do. And I'm going to turn that question back on you. When do you think in your developmental process you will be ready to go into a production process for premiere? Let's see. Somebody asks, somebody saw the sentence, please submit a budget for the project's creation and development process. And their question is, does this mean we don't include the budget for the premiere or running production costs? That's exactly what it means. In your budget, do not budget for the premiere or running costs. That will greatly hurt your chances. If a work sample is from a production recorded in 2017, is that allowed? Absolutely. We don't have a year cutoff from pieces in the past. Let's see. Would a new theatrical work that incorporates elements of drag allow for the use of existing songs for lip syncing in sections of the piece? That's an interesting question because there's no one answer. It depends. I'm going to give you a hypothetical. If the piece, this new theatrical work, has an original story, if if lip syncing, if the element of drag allowing for the use of lip syncing is an element of the story and not the majority of the story, that would work. Do know that you would be responsible for clearing those licenses for those existing songs. So think about that in terms of how much that might be. Can a video sample be a film of a play, or does it have to be a video of a production filmed in front of a live audience? This really is this is the crux of the work samples. I really am looking for production footage of a piece performed in front of a live audience. Reason being is this is helping us see how you as an artist realize your work. And that helps us look at feasibility. A film of a play, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for production footage filmed in front of a live audience. Let's see, moving on. Can an international artist be a leading artist with American co-creators? I think we're coming down to the end of questions, which is great. Can an international artist be a lead artist with American co-creators? Absolutely. Yeah. Remember, lead artists can be based anywhere in the world. You can be citizens of any country. And this is a national and international open call. So yes. Moving on. When submitting for a collaboration on a work of music theater between creator, writer, and composer, do we need to submit a work sample for each, or are work samples for one okay? We're looking for work samples of the lead artist. So pick your lead artist accordingly. Is democracy itself accepted as a format for this funding? I'm sorry, I don't really know what you're asking. I don't think we could give enough money to fix democracy. But I also don't mean to be flippant. If you want to rephrase that question and ask it again, I can try to answer it. We are getting down to the end of things. If the previous work was in educational theater that toured schools and communities and won awards, but played mostly daytimes, does it count as generative? I think you meant, does it count as a eligible production? Yes, absolutely. We love matinees. We love theater for audiences and other community, or for young audiences and other communities. Then would a 15-minute solo piece as part of a showcase in a premiered production count as a production? It would not. That's a short piece. That's not an evening length piece. Then let's see. Somebody I think is okay. I asked what documentation is acceptable if no video or photos are available, and I referenced last year I think me, saying a link to my website mentioning the work would be sufficient. A link to your website in which the work is mentioned would be sufficient. If it's clear that the link on your website, or if the link on your website is clear that it was a premiered production, that could work to show the qualifying production. And then a corollary of that question is regarding work samples, just to confirm, are staged reading videos in front of a live audience okay for work samples? That is not okay for the first two work samples. For the first two work samples need to be premiered work, production footage of premiered work. If you're staged reading in front of a live audience is for your third work sample, which is only for in progress samples of the proposed project. That is okay. Let's see. Let's see. Would Democracy Cycle consider changing the requirement for video? It costs thousands of dollars to record an archival video of a play, especially if performed with equity actors. Equity requires blah, 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 blah. I would say that their equity does allow you to record a piece and use it for funding purposes. That recording need not be a multi-camera shoot. It could be the dress rehearsal. But it's very important to see how your work is realized, how you realize your work. The next question I love, is it okay if the proposed play addresses democracy themes through magic, realist, or surrealism? I think that would be fabulous. I look forward to seeing that proposal. And I think you mean magical realism or surrealism. It's fabulous if that is what the work will be. In the proposal, please make it as concrete as possible. What you are proposing and how specifically you are addressing democracy and which aspect of democracy. Is it okay if the work samples production footage is not professionally filmed? Absolutely. iPhones have amazing cameras now. Moving on. If a collective is a quartet, just one member of the quartet submits as the lead artist, correct? Correct. But work samples would be representative of the quartet's work. The lead artist must be a generative artist. And so they must, the work samples need to be their composed work. Let's see. So instead of thinking of the collective being the lead artist, please identify who in your collective is the lead artist, in which case they must be a composer, and the work samples need to be their composed work. Let's see. The next is, do you consider a 55-minute length production evening length? I do. Yes. Then let's see. I am a US-based producer working with an international artist who is not fluent in English. May I use my submittable account to apply in English in her name? Yes, it does. She does need to be the lead artist, and she does need to generate the text, which then you will probably translate before you put the application in. Please know that all of the submittable emails and notifications will go to your email address. So it is then your responsibility to pass those on to her. Let's see. Regarding the budget, it sounds like you're asking us to think as a producer or to find a producer for our work who is not PAC NYC. What I am saying is, if you shouldn't assume that PAC NYC will produce your piece. If you are not, Alessandra, slow down a little bit, please. If you are not experienced in producing your own work, then maybe budget for a line producer or a project manager for your development process. I know that some artists are very experienced in self-producing, others are absolutely not. And you may want to give that a little more thought as you put together your budget. But PAC will not be able to act as a producer for all 25 commissioned artists. I will be available in the role of kind of a consulting creative producer to talk with, bounce questions also off of, brainstorm with. I cannot act as your line producer, but I can be a consulting creative producer. Let's see. When will the recording of this Zoom webinar be available for future use, and for what length of time? For what length of time? So after we finish this Zoom webinar, we are going to work with it to generate captions. The captions, if you're looking at captions now, are auto-generated, and I'm trying to speak clearly, but I'm positive that I didn't succeed 100% of the time. We will generate captions that we then load into YouTube before we upload it to YouTube. And that will take a little bit of time. So maybe a week or two. It will be posted on the homepage of PAC NYC, or sorry, of the Democracy Cycle. The homepage of the Democracy Cycle is www.pacnyc.org/the-democracy-cycle. Now, for what length of time, the recording of this webinar will be on that page for the entirety of this open call. Let's see. Is interactive outdoor light installation applicable? It does have a. I don't think that there is a live component in there with live performers, not as you write that question. So it does not look like it would be an eligible project. Let's see. Can you define composer for the lead artist? When I think of composer, I think of music. I used composer in answering questions that were specifically in a music context. Other generative artists are playwright, choreographer, let's see, composer, librettist, director, and assistant director are not generative roles for the purposes of this commission. Let's see. My group performance video has some moments of drone footage from a bird's eye view taken during the dress rehearsal. Is this acceptable as a work sample? That's interesting. Not on its own, because we do want to see things from the audience point of view. We're going a little long. I'm going to end this at 2:25 at the latest, just to let you know. You know, I think there's not a straightforward answer to this question. I would need to know a little more information, but if you have other production footage taken from an audience point of view, that would probably be more what's the word? Effective. Then if the final project is the completion of a play script by a playwright, does the budget need to include a staged production? Absolutely not. Your budget should not include the premiere or the running costs. It should be only the creation and development. Let's see. Let's see. I think we're winding down. I think that we're going to end now. I am going to thank everyone for all of your questions and all of your attention. I really appreciate it. I know we've lost some viewers as we've gone along in this Q&A. But this recording will be available to everyone in a week or two, probably more like 2 weeks. Thank you very much for thinking about proposing a project to the Democracy Cycle. And I really am grateful for everyone who makes this program possible. And I'm very grateful to all of you artists. Thank you again, and we'll see you. Sorry, I couldn't come up with a graceful ending to this. Have a great day. Bye.